The roar of the engine screamed against the chaos outside. Captain Luke Anders gripped the yoke with white knuckles, his heart racing as the storm battered his small aircraft. He had flown this route dozens of times before, a standard delivery trip from Miami to Puerto Rico. Routine, familiar, until tonight. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight November 732, requesting immediate assistance. His voice broke over the radio, swallowed by static. No response. Luke's eyes darted to the instruments. The compass spun erratically, the altimeter jumped like a faulty heartbeat, and the horizon line disappeared in the blinding flashes of lightning. It was as if the very rules of nature had been rewritten. He glanced at the clock. Midnight. Exactly 3 hours since takeoff. Something was wrong. Focus, Luke, he whispered to himself, though the sound of his voice barely calmed the rising panic. You've trained for emergencies. You've got this. But this wasn't in the manual. Earlier that morning in Miami, the airport buzzed with its usual energy, a mix of hurried passengers and roaring engines. Luke had grabbed his coffee and glanced at the weather forecast. Clear skies for most of the trip, with a slight chance of isolated storms near the Bermuda Triangle. Better steer clear of the triangle, Captain, joked a colleague, a veteran pilot named Greg. Luke chuckled. Come on, Greg. You don't believe that nonsense, do you? Greg's smile faded. I don't, but plenty of good pilots do. Planes don't just vanish for no reason, Luke. Strange things happen out there. Present day, the cockpit. Luke shook off the memory as turbulence jolted the plane violently. Slamming his head against the window, blood trickled down his temple, warm and sticky, but he couldn't let himself lose focus. Suddenly, the storm broke. Silence. The plane emerged into a calm, eerily still sky. No clouds, no stars, just an unnatural glowing mist stretching in every direction. Luke blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then he saw it. A massive, shimmering structure floated in the distance, impossible to define. It was metallic yet organic, shifting like liquid, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the cockpit. It defied every law of physics Luke had ever known. What the? He muttered, his voice trembling. As he approached, the instruments went haywire again. Lights flickered. The engine sputtered. Luke fought to keep control, but the yoke was stiff as if something, or someone, was pulling the plane toward the anomaly. Luke's thoughts raced. Was this what happened to all those planes and ships? The disappearances that turned into ghost stories and conspiracy theories? His father used to tell him about Flight 19, the Navy bombers that vanished in 1945, about the USS Cyclops, about Amelia Earhart. Could this explain it all? Suddenly, the cockpit was bathed in light, blinding, otherworldly. Luke shielded his eyes, heart pounding. A voice, mechanical yet almost human, crackled over the radio. Turn back! Who is this? What's going on? Luke shouted into the headset. Turn back, or you will disappear like the rest. Before Luke could respond, the plane shuddered violently. The engines roared back to life, and the light vanished. He was back in the storm, hurtling toward the ocean below. Hours later, Luke woke up to the sound of waves lapping against the wreckage of his plane. He was floating on a piece of debris, alive but barely. His head throbbed, his clothes were soaked, and the glowing mist lingered faintly on the horizon. He wasn't supposed to survive. As a rescue helicopter approached in the distance, Luke stared at the horizon, haunted by what he'd seen. The voice still echoed in his mind. Turn back, or you will disappear like the rest. They say the Bermuda Triangle is just a myth, a coincidence of lost ships and planes. But Captain Luke Anders will tell you otherwise. He survived something out there, something beyond explanation. And he's about to find out. Surviving was just the beginning. Luke's hospital room. The faint beep of a heart monitor echoes as sunlight streams through the blinds. Luke Anders lies in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the storm in his mind. Luke's head still throbbed, but the physical pain was nothing. compared to the unease gnawing at him. The voice, the glowing mist, and that structure, it wasn't just a hallucination. He knew what he saw, even if it defied logic. A nurse entered the room with a clipboard, interrupting his thoughts. "Captain Anders, the doctors say you're lucky to be alive. The Coast Guard said they found you miles off your flight path." What happened out there? Luke hesitated. Should he tell her? Would she even believe him? "I got caught in the storm. Instruments failed, that's all." The words felt hollow, but he wasn't ready to share the full truth. Not yet. Flash forward to 2 weeks later. Luke sat in his small Miami apartment, surrounded by open maps, flight logs, and his laptop glowing with conspiracy forms. He hadn't slept much since the crash. Something about that storm and what came after felt intentional, as though it was meant to keep him away from whatever he saw. The forums were filled with theories, magnetic anomalies, time warps, even alien activity. The posts were fascinating yet absurd. Luke never believed in that kind of thing, but now he wasn't so sure. One post caught his eye. "Survivors of the Triangle, unheard stories." It listed a handful of names, pilots, sailors, even a diver, who all claimed to have witnessed strange phenomena and survived. None of their accounts made the news, but the details matched Luke's experience. The glowing mist, the strange pull, the voice. Luke's thoughts race as he jots notes into a worn notebook. The structure wasn't random. The voice warned me, but why? Why hasn't anyone talked about this? One name stood out on the list, Commander Henry Cole, a retired Navy officer who reportedly survived a similar incident in 1973. Luke needed answers, and Cole seemed like the only person who might have them. A small diner outside Jacksonville. Luke found himself sitting across from Commander Cole, a wiry man in his 70s with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through everything. Cole sipped his black coffee, studying Luke before speaking. "You're lucky, Captain. Not many live to talk about it." His voice was gruff, but carried the weight of experience. Luke leaned in, barely able to contain his urgency. "You've seen it too, haven't you? The mist, the structure?" Cole's hand froze mid-sip, and his expression hardened. "Keep your voice down. They're always listening." "Who?" Luke asked, lowering his voice. Cole glanced around the diner before leaning closer. "I don't know who or what they are, but they control the Triangle. That's why no one talks about it. Those who dig too deep disappear." Luke's stomach tightened. He wanted to dismiss Cole as paranoid, but the man's eyes held the same haunted look he'd seen in his own reflection. "What did you see?" Luke pressed. Cole hesitated, then sighed. "It was a rescue mission. A Navy bomber went missing, and we were sent to find it. We never did. Instead, we found something else. A light in the sky. It pulled us in, just like you said. My entire crew vanished. I don't know how or why, but I woke up in the middle of the ocean. Alone." Luke's hands trembled as he scribbled notes. "There's more," Cole continued. "The military knows. They've known for decades. That's why they keep it quiet. The disappearances aren't accidents. They're tests." "Tests for what?" Luke's voice was barely a whisper. Cole shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not meant for us to understand. My advice, walk away. Let it go before it consumes you." Luke's apartment. Luke stared at the map pinned to his wall, dotted with red marks representing disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Commander Cole's warning echoed in his mind, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already in too deep. Then his laptop pinged. A new email. The subject line read, "You're not alone." Luke hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single line of text. "They've been watching you since the crash. Stop digging." Attached was a grainy photo of Luke's wrecked plane. taken before the Coast Guard arrived. Luke Anders thought surviving the Bermuda Triangle was the end of his nightmare. But he's about to discover that the real danger begins once you start asking questions. Luke's apartment at night. A dim desk lamp casts flickering shadows across a cluttered desk covered with maps, photos, and printouts. Luke sits, staring at his laptop screen, replaying the email he received. The words, "They've been watching you," gnawed at Luke. The photo of his wrecked plane, a shot taken before the Coast Guard arrived, was proof that someone knew more than they let on. But who and why? Luke rubbed his temples, exhaustion pulling at him. The conspiracy forms were no longer just wild theories. They were threads connecting him to something bigger, something dangerous. Early morning, Miami streets. Luke walked to a nearby cafe, hoping fresh air and caffeine might clear his mind. The city buzzed with life, oblivious to the chaos swirling in his world. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, though every glance over his shoulder revealed only tourists and commuters. At the counter, the barista handed him a coffee. "Rough morning?" Luke smiled faintly. "You could say that." As he turned to leave, a folded newspaper on the counter caught his eye. The headline read, "Unexplained Phenomena Over Bermuda Triangle Resurfaces After Decades." Luke froze. The article detailed recent strange activity reported by fishermen and private pilots. Flickering lights in the sky, compass failures, and a strange hum that some claim to feel in their bones. It all sounded eerily familiar, but it was the photo that stopped him cold. A grainy image of the glowing mist, identical to what he'd seen during the storm. Back in Luke's apartment, Luke pinned the article next to his map and stared at the growing web of connections. His mind raced as he traced the paths of missing planes and ships. That's when he noticed it, a pattern. The disappearances weren't random. They formed a rough triangular grid, with each point equidistant from a central location. "Coordinates," he murmured, jotting them down. Luke remembers Commander Cole's words. "The disappearances aren't accidents, they're tests." Luke's breath quickened. What if the central location wasn't just the source of the anomalies? What if it was where everything started? Luke at a library, combing through historical records. The library was nearly empty, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft shuffle of pages turning. Luke dug into old ship logs and flight records, searching for connections. One entry stood out, a handwritten journal from 1927. A merchant ship captain had detailed an encounter with a glowing mist and a humming sound, eerily similar to Luke's experience. The entry ended abruptly with a single chilling line. "They're calling us home." Luke's apartment that evening. Luke's notebook was filled with frantic scribbles, coordinates, and theories. He couldn't shake the phrase, "They're calling us home." Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "Stop now. This is your last warning." Luke stared at the screen, his pulse pounding. Before he could respond, his laptop screen flickered, and the browser closed on its own. A single line of text appeared on the black screen. "Curiosity is dangerous, Captain. A late-night drive." Unable to stay in his apartment, Luke drove aimlessly through the city. The roads bathed in orange streetlight. His mind replayed every warning he'd received, from Commander Cole, the email, and now this. As he passed a quiet stretch of road, he noticed a car in his rearview mirror. It had been following him for miles. Luke's chest tightened. He turned down a side street, then another, trying to lose the tail, but the car stayed with him. His palms were slick with sweat as he gripped the wheel, heart pounding. Finally, he pulled into an empty parking lot and waited. The car slowed as it approached, its headlights blinding. Luke braced himself, reaching for the tire iron under his seat. But before he could act, the car sped off into the night. Luke back in his apartment, shaken. That night, Luke couldn't sleep. His walls felt like they were closing in. The patterns on his map, the warnings, the strange events, they weren't coincidences. He stared at the coordinates he'd written down earlier, a location in the middle of the triangle. It was risky, maybe even suicidal, but he had to know the truth. Luke picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, Greg, it's Luke. I need a favor. You still have that twin-engine Cessna? Patterns, symbols, clues. The Bermuda Triangle is more than a mystery. It's a message. But Luke Anders is about to discover that some messages were never meant to be decoded. The hum of an engine fills the air. Luke Anders grips the controls of a twin-engine Cessna, flying low over the open ocean. The sun sets on the horizon, casting the water in hues of orange and gold. Beside him sits Greg, his old colleague and the only person Luke trusts to join him on this dangerous journey. Greg glanced at Luke, a mixture of concern and curiosity etched on his face. "You want to tell me what we're doing out here, or are we just joyriding over the Atlantic for fun?" Luke hesitated. He hadn't told Greg the full story, only that he needed a second set of hands for a personal project. "I'll explain everything soon. Just trust me for now, okay?" Greg sighed, adjusting his headset. "You always were the mysterious type, Anders. But if this has anything to do with the triangle, I hope you know what you're getting us into." Luke's stomach twisted. He wasn't sure he did. The night before, Luke had barely slept, haunted by the warnings and the strange text messages. He spent hours reviewing his notes and maps, the coordinates calling to him like a siren song. When he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing mist, the structure, and the blinding light. The voice echoed in his mind. "Turn back." But Luke wasn't turning back. Not now. Present. The cockpit. The plane's instruments hummed steadily as they approached the coordinates. Luke's pulse quickened as the altimeter began to flicker. Greg noticed it too. "Your instruments acting up?" Greg asked, his voice tinged with unease. "Yeah," Luke replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's starting." Greg frowned. "Starting? What's starting?" Before Luke could answer, the radio crackled to life, filling the cockpit with static. Both men froze. Then a familiar voice emerged, a distorted mechanical tone. "Turn back, Captain Anders. This is your final warning." Greg's eyes widened. What the hell was that? Luke's grip on the controls tightened. I've heard that voice before. During the crash, Greg stared at him, realization dawning. "You're serious. This is about the triangle, isn't it?" Luke nodded, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "There's something out here, Greg. Something they don't want us to find." Outside the plane, as night falls, the sky darkened and the horizon disappeared into a void of black. The glowing mist began to form, swirling like ghostly tendrils around the plane. The hum returned, low, rhythmic, and vibrating through their bones. Greg's hands trembled as he adjusted the controls. "Luke, I don't like this. We should turn back." Luke shook his head, determination hardening his features. "We're close. I can feel it." Suddenly, the plane jolted violently, throwing them against their restraints. The altimeter spun wildly, and the compass was useless. The radio crackled again. "This is your last chance. Turn back or face the consequences." Luke wrestles with his decision. The warnings were clear. Whoever or whatever was behind this didn't want him to continue. But how could he walk away now, with the truth so close? He thought of all the people who had disappeared. Pilots, sailors, explorers. Maybe he could find out what had happened to them. Maybe he could bring answers to the families who had been left wondering. But what if Cole was right? What if digging too deep meant he wouldn't make it back? The cockpit, chaos escalating. The plane lurched again, the glowing mist now fully engulfing them. The hum grew louder, almost deafening. Greg shouted over the noise, "Luke, we need to get out of here. This isn't worth it." Luke's heart pounded. He knew Greg was right. The plane was barely holding together, and whatever was pulling them in wasn't going to let them go without a fight. "Fine," Luke shouted back. "We're turning around." He yanked the controls, pulling the plane away from the coordinates. The mist seemed to resist, holding them in place, but finally it began to dissipate. The hum faded, and the instruments stabilized. Both men sat in silence, breathing heavily as the plane flew back into clear skies. A remote airstrip, hours later. The plane touched down, the hum of the engines replaced by the chirp of crickets in the night. Luke and Greg climbed out, shaken but alive. Greg rounded on Luke, his face flushed with anger. "You want to tell me what the hell that was? Because I didn't sign up for this." Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Greg, but whatever it is, it's big. And it's dangerous." Greg shook his head. "You're gonna get yourself killed. Maybe me too. I'm out." He walked away, leaving Luke alone on the tarmac. Luke in his apartment. Luke stared at the map on his wall. The coordinates still circled in red. He couldn't stop now. Whatever was out there had tried to warn him, but he needed answers. As he sat down at his desk, his laptop pinged. A new email. Subject: "You've been chosen." Luke's breath caught as he clicked it open. The email contained only one line. "The truth isn't hidden. It's waiting for you. Warnings ignored, friendship strained, and danger looming. Luke Anders is closer than ever to uncovering the secrets of the Bermuda Triangle. But how far is he willing to go to find the truth?" Luke's apartment, late at night. The room is dimly lit by the glow of his laptop screen. Luke sits at his desk, staring at the email. "The truth isn't hidden. It's waiting for you." Luke clicked the message again, rereading it as if he had missed some hidden detail. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between ignoring the cryptic email and diving headfirst into the rabbit hole. The email's sender was anonymous. No traceable address, no name, just a subject line that felt both inviting and ominous. Beneath the message was an attachment labeled coordinates. He hesitated. Opening it might make him a target, or worse, but his curiosity outweighed his fear. With a deep breath, he clicked the file. A set of numbers appeared on the screen. 25.000 degrees north. 71.000 degrees west. It was deep in the Bermuda Triangle, miles from the last set of coordinates he had traced. Luke at a small aviation hangar. Luke stood in front of his old Cessna, its nose still dented from the crash weeks ago. Greg was gone, but Luke didn't need him for this. He had to see it through alone. The hum of footsteps behind him made him turn. A man in a dark suit approached, his face partially shadowed by the hangar's dim lights. "Captain Anders," the man said, his tone calm but unnervingly precise. Luke tensed. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "Let's just say I represent certain interests that don't appreciate your curiosity." Luke stepped back instinctively. "If you're here to threaten me, you're wasting your time. I'm going." The man's expression didn't change. "You think this is just about you?" "There are forces at work here you can't possibly understand. Forces that will bury you if you get too close." Luke clenched his fists. "Then why haven't they buried me already?" The man leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because they're waiting to see if you'll make the right choice. But let me be clear. If you don't turn back, there won't be a second warning." Without another word, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Luke's flight into the triangle. Luke flew alone, the cockpit eerily quiet except for the steady hum of the engines. The new coordinates glowed on his GPS, guiding him deeper into the triangle than he'd ever dared to go. The sky was clear, the ocean below calm, but a sense of unease grew with every mile. The hum began again, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat reverberating through the plain. Suddenly, the clouds ahead began to shift unnaturally. forming a swirling vortex. The glow of the mist returned, brighter and more vivid than before. Luke tightened his grip on the controls, his heart pounding. Okay, Anders, you've come this far. No turning back now. The anomaly. As Luke entered the vortex, the instruments failed again. The altimeter spun wildly, and the compass was useless. But this time, something else happened. The glowing mist gave way to a massive structure rising from the ocean. A metallic, otherworldly platform that seemed to shimmer and pulse with energy. Luke's jaw dropped. It was the same structure he had seen during the crash, but now it was closer, clearer. Symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, their patterns shifting like living organisms. The plane began to descend on its own, as if guided by an unseen force. Luke's attempts to pull up were futile. The structure seemed to want him to land. The platform. Luke stepped out of the plane, his boots clanging against the cold, metallic surface. The air felt heavy, charged with static electricity. He approached the symbols, running his fingers over the glowing lines. They felt warm, almost alive. His mind raced. Was this alien technology? An ancient artifact? Then he noticed something chilling. Embedded in the structure were remnants of other planes and ships. Propellers, wings, rusted hulls, all fused seamlessly into the metal, as though they had been absorbed. A deep hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense. Luke turned, and his breath caught. A figure stood before him, humanoid but distinctly otherworldly. Its skin shimmered like the surface of the platform, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The figure speaks. "You were warned," it said, its voice echoing in Luke's mind rather than through the air. Luke swallowed hard. "What is this place? What are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question. "This is a gateway, and we are its keepers." "A gateway to what?" "To understanding, or destruction. The choice is yours." Luke's internal conflict. Luke's mind raced. The disappearances, the warnings, the strange phenomena, it all led to this. But why him? Why now? The figure seemed to sense his thoughts. "You were chosen because you survived. Few do. Fewer still return." Luke's voice shook. "Return where? What are you talking about?" The figure's glow intensified. "You will know soon enough. But tread carefully, Captain Anders. The truth is not always a gift." Luke back in the cockpit. The platform began to fade as the plane rose into the sky. Luke's instruments blinked back to life, and the vortex dissolved. He glanced back, but the structure was gone, as though it had never existed. Luke Anders has uncovered the first piece of a puzzle that has remained unsolved for centuries. But the deeper he digs, the more dangerous his journey becomes. What lies beyond the gateway? And will he survive long enough to find out? Luke's apartment, late at night. The room is dark, except for the glow of his laptop screen. Luke sits at his desk, staring at the notes and symbols he's drawn in his notebook, trying to make sense of the mysterious structure he encountered. Luke flipped through the pages of his notebook, filled with scribbles of the glowing symbols, coordinates, and his fragmented thoughts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the figure on the platform. Its words echoed in his mind. The truth is not always a gift. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his trance. It was a text from an unknown number. "You've seen too much. They're coming for you." Luke's pulse quickened. He jumped up, pulling the blinds shut and checking the locks on his door. A strange sound filled the room. A low hum. Faint at first, but growing louder. Outside Luke's apartment. Through a crack in the blinds, Luke spotted a black SUV idling across the street. Its tinted windows reflected the dim streetlights, making it impossible to see who was inside. Luke's breath quickened. He grabbed his bag, hastily stuffing it with his notes, maps, and laptop. If someone was coming for him, He wasn't going to stick around to find out why. A late-night diner. Luke sat in a corner booth, the bag clutched tightly by his side. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he sipped a lukewarm cup of coffee, his eyes darting to the entrance every few seconds. He pulled out his laptop and opened the folder where he had saved photos of the symbols from the platform. The patterns seemed familiar, as though they mirrored something he'd seen before. His fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for ancient languages, geometric codes, anything that might offer a clue. Then he found it. The symbols bore a striking resemblance to crop circles reported in the 1970s. But there was more. Similar patterns had been found etched into ancient ruins around the world, from the pyramids of Egypt to the temples of the Maya. This isn't just a gateway, Luke muttered to himself. It's connected to everything. Luke driving through the night. With each mile, Luke felt the weight of the discovery sinking in. The Bermuda Triangle wasn't just an isolated phenomenon. It was part of a global network, a system that had existed for centuries, if not millennia. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "You're out of time." As Luke glanced at his phone, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. A black SUV sped up behind him, its engine roaring. Luke's heart pounded as the SUV closed the gap. He swerved onto a side road, the tires screeching. The SUV followed, relentless. Luke's car versus the SUV. The narrow road twisted through dense woods, the darkness broken only by the beams of the pursuing SUV. Luke's hands gripped the wheel as he took a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a tree. The SUV slammed into the back of his car, sending it skidding. Luke fought to regain control, his mind racing. Whoever was after him wasn't trying to scare him. They were trying to stop him. Up ahead, he spotted an old bridge spanning a deep ravine. Luke floored the gas pedal, the bridge creaking under the weight of his car. As he crossed, he yanked the wheel hard to the left, sending the car spinning. The SUV didn't stop. It barreled straight ahead, right off the edge of the bridge. Luke sat in stunned silence, his chest heaving. The wreckage below was obscured by darkness. But he didn't wait to see if anyone survived. He had to keep moving. A motel room in a remote town. Luke sat on the edge of the bed, his bag open beside him. He stared at the symbols again, trying to piece together their meaning. Then he remembered the figure's words. Few return. The disappearances weren't random. The gateway wasn't just a trap, it was a test. Only those who survived were allowed to see the truth. But why? And what was the ultimate purpose of the gateway? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Room service," a voice called. Luke froze. He hadn't ordered anything. Slowly, he reached for the tire iron he had taken from his car and crept toward the door. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice steady, despite his pounding heart. No response. He yanked the door open, the tire iron raised, but no one was there. Only an envelope lay on the ground. Luke opens the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the platform he had landed on, but the shot was taken from above, as though from a satellite. Scrawled on the back were two words, "Keep going." Luke's hands shook. Someone wanted him to uncover the truth. But who? And why did it feel like he was being played? From both sides, pursued by shadowy forces and armed with only fragments of the truth. Luke Anders is closer than ever to unraveling the secrets of the Bermuda Triangle. But as the forces around him close in, the line between ally and enemy blurs. Can he survive the ultimate test? A stormy ocean under a darkened sky. Waves crash violently against the sides of a lone fishing vessel. Luke Anders stands on the deck, gripping the railing as lightning illuminates the horizon. His face is tense, his jaw set, and his eyes fixed on the coordinates displayed on his GPS. The small fishing boat rocked wildly as Luke braced himself against the rail, staring into the mist ahead. The glowing fog was unmistakable. It was the same anomaly he had seen during his crash weeks ago. This time, there was no turning back. The old fisherman, who had reluctantly agreed to take him this far, shouted over the roaring waves, "Whatever you're looking for, I hope it's worth it. This storm's getting worse by the second." Luke turned, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Drop anchor here. I'll handle the rest." The fisherman's eyes widened. "You're insane if you think I'm sticking around." But Luke was already lowering a small dinghy into the water, his bag of notes and tools strapped to his back. Luke rowing into the mist. The air was heavy and humid, the glow of the mist casting eerie shadows across the water. The hum returned, louder and more intense than ever, vibrating through his chest like a second heartbeat. Luke's thoughts raced as he approached the coordinates. Every warning, every cryptic message, and every narrow escape had led him here. The platform wasn't just a piece of alien technology or an ancient artifact. It was something far more significant. As the mist parted, the structure emerged from the water like a living being. Its surface pulsed with light, the symbols shifting and rearranging themselves as though reacting to his presence. Luke climbed onto the platform, his boots echoing against the metallic surface. The air was thick with static electricity, each breath feeling heavier than the last. The center of the platform, at the heart of the structure, stood a large glowing sphere, suspended in midair. It emitted a low hum, the vibrations intensifying as Luke approached. The symbols on the platform shifted again, forming a pattern that seemed to guide him closer. Luke reached out, his hand trembling. As his fingers brushed the surface of the sphere, a surge of energy shot through him, and the world around him dissolved into blinding light. A cascade of memories and visions. Images flooded Luke's mind. Ancient civilizations building pyramids, sailors lost at sea, pilots disappearing into the mist. He saw glimpses of alien worlds, their landscapes surreal and unearthly. Then came the figure from the platform, its glowing eyes piercing through the visions. "You seek answers," the figure said, its voice echoing in Luke's mind. "But are you prepared for the truth?" The vision shifted again, showing humanity's history, intertwined with the anomalies of the Bermuda Triangle. The disappearances weren't accidents, they were deliberate. The triangle was a gateway, a test to determine who was worthy of something greater. Luke collapsing onto the platform. Gasping for air, Luke struggled to make sense of what he had seen. His head pounded, his body trembling from the energy surge. The figure appeared before him again, this time more solid, more real. "You have passed the first test, Captain Anders. But the greatest test is yet to come." Luke forced himself to his feet. "What test? What do you want from me?" The figure's glow dimmed slightly, its voice softer, but no less intense. "The gateway is not meant for destruction. It is meant for evolution, but only a select few can understand its purpose." Luke shook his head. "Evolution? What are you talking about?" The figure gestured toward the glowing sphere. "Step through, and you will see. Or turn back, and remain bound to the limits of your world." Luke's internal conflict. Luke stared at the sphere, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to run, to turn back and forget everything he had seen. But he couldn't. He thought of the people who had disappeared, their families, their unanswered questions. He thought of the warnings, the cryptic messages, and the sacrifices he had made to get here. If the triangle was a test, then he had to see it through. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the light of the sphere enveloping him completely. A new world. Luke found himself standing on a vast, glowing plain, the sky above filled with shifting colors and unfamiliar constellations. The air was thin but breathable, and the hum of the gateway was replaced by a serene silence. He turned, expecting to see the figure, but instead he saw a group of people, pilots, sailors, explorers. They looked just as lost as he felt, their eyes wide with awe and fear. One of them stepped forward, a woman in a tattered flight suit. "You made it," she said, her voice trembling. Luke frowned. Made it where? She gestured to the horizon where a massive, otherworldly city rose in the distance, its towers shimmering with the same glow as the platform. Welcome, she said, to the other side of the triangle. Luke Anders has crossed the threshold, stepping into a world beyond imagination. But as he begins to unravel the purpose of the gateway, he must face the ultimate question. What price will he pay for the truth? A shimmering city stretches across an alien horizon, its towers glowing faintly, pulsating in harmony with the air itself. Luke Anders stands at the edge of a glowing plain, surrounded by a handful of other survivors, their faces a mix of awe and fear. Luke couldn't speak, his eyes locked on the surreal city ahead. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. A blend of technology and nature, its towers appearing to grow organically from the ground. The sky above swirled with vibrant colors, stars forming constellations he didn't recognize. The woman in the flight suit stepped forward again. Her name tag read R. Carter, but the wear and tear made it hard to read. You're lucky, she said, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. Most don't make it past the gateway. Luke turned to her, trying to make sense of it all. What is this place? Why are we here? Carter hesitated, glancing at the others. We don't know for sure, but we think it's a test. A test? Luke's voice was sharp, his frustration boiling over. A test for what? A group discussion by a small glowing pool. The survivors sat together, exchanging fragmented stories. There were sailors who disappeared decades ago, pilots from as far back as World War II, and even a scientist from the 1980s who had been studying the triangle. We've all been chosen, Carter explained, her tone grave. But for what? None of us really knows. The city, she trailed off, gesturing toward the distant skyline. It's alive. It shows us things, forces us to face ourselves. Luke frowned. What do you mean? A wiry man in a faded Navy uniform spoke up. Memories, regrets, fears. The city digs into your mind. It doesn't let you hide from anything. Luke walking toward the city. Despite their warnings, Luke couldn't ignore the pull of the city. It was as if the structures were calling to him, the hum vibrating through the ground with every step. As he entered, the world around him shifted. The glowing towers seemed to pulse in response to his presence, their surfaces rippling like water. Suddenly, the air around him warped, and he found himself in a familiar place, the cockpit of his plane during the storm. The violent winds roared, the instruments spun wildly, and his frantic voice called out over the radio. Mayday! Mayday! But this time, something was different. The voice that had warned him, the mechanical, otherworldly voice, spoke again. You have seen the truth, Captain Anders, but now you must decide. Will you remain bound by fear, or will you evolve? The scene dissolved, and Luke was back in the city. Luke in the city's core. At the heart of the city stood a massive obelisk, its surface covered in the same shifting symbols as the platform. As Luke approached, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The obelisk pulsed, and a figure materialized before him. It was the same being from the platform, its glowing eyes fixed on him. You have crossed the gateway, the figure said, its voice resonating in Luke's mind. You have seen the fractures of your world, the chaos of your existence, but now you must choose. Choose what? Luke demanded. The figure gestured to the obelisk, which shimmered and split into two paths of light. One path will return you to your world, your life untouched but your questions unanswered. The other will allow you to stay, to learn, to understand, but it will cost you everything you know. Luke's internal conflict. Luke's chest tightened as he stared at the glowing paths. Going back meant safety, familiarity, but also ignorance. Staying meant diving deeper into the unknown, risking everything for answers that might not even make sense. He thought of his father, A Navy man who had disappeared in the Triangle when Luke was a child. The memories came flooding back, the unanswered questions, the nights he'd spent staring at the sky, wondering what had happened. If his father had been here, had faced the same choice, what would he have done? Luke stepping toward the obelisk. Luke made his decision. "I'll stay," he said, his voice steady. The figure's eyes flared with light. "Then you will begin to see." The obelisk pulsed, and Luke was enveloped in a blinding glow. Luke's perspective shifting. Suddenly his mind expanded, his vision filled with knowledge. He saw the earth from above, its oceans and continents glowing with energy. He saw the interconnectedness of the universe, the way everything, time, space, life, was woven together like threads in a vast tapestry. The triangle wasn't just a gateway. It was a bridge between worlds, a test of humanity's readiness to evolve beyond its limitations. Luke's breath caught as he realized the truth. Disappearances weren't accidents. Those who passed the test became part of something greater, their consciousness transcending the physical world. Back on Earth. Weeks later, a rescue ship found Luke's empty plane floating in the Atlantic. The media called it another Bermuda Triangle mystery, but no trace of Luke Anders was ever found. They say the Bermuda Triangle is a place of mystery, of chaos, of fear. But for those who dare to face its secrets, it is something much more. A gateway to the unknown. Luke Anders found the truth, but at a price few are willing to pay. The question remains, if the choice were yours, what would you do?